Today I want to talk about commontone diminished chords. This is a type of non-functioning chord. When talking about functional harmony, you can basically lump any chord you play into one of three categories: tonic, predominant, or dominant. Any chord that doesn't serve one of these three purposes can be considered non-functional. They're sometimes called linear or embellishing chords. Functional harmony is what gives music a sense of progression, like it's going somewhere. Non-functional harmony only serves to embellish or color where we currently are in the functional progression. The commontone diminished chord is just one type of embellishing chord. Chords like this are best thought of as multiple neighboring tones happening simultaneously. A neighboring tone is when a chord tone steps out to a non-chord tone and then back to that chord tone, like this, for instance. In the case of embellishing chords, you have that kind of thing happening in multiple voices simultaneously, and it just so happens that all together they form a familiar harmony that we often hear used in a functional context. The commontone diminished chord is named the way it is because it shares a root with the chord it's embellishing. In my example, I'm playing C major to C fully diminished 7, back to C major. C major is where we are. The C diminished 7 is coloring it. If we break down each voice, we have E to E flat, back to E. C down to A and back to C. And G down to G flat and back to G natural. If I apply any of those motions to my C major chord, it all sounds good and convincing. If I play them all together, they form a fully diminished 7th chord. Sounds really cool. This is just a simple way of coloring a chord that you're currently hanging out on. Now, here's a neat thing. This diminished chord is being used in a non-functioning way. However, in functional harmony, fully diminished 7th chords are typically dominant functioning chords. They want to resolve a half step up from whatever note in the chord you're calling the root. I phrase it that way because a fully diminished 7th chord is a symmetrical harmony. Every note in the chord is separated by 1.5 steps, meaning you can't invert it in a way that changes its acoustic effect. And because of that, any note in the chord can be resolved up a half step as if it is the root. For now, I'll just say C is the root because it's my common tone with C major and it's the lowest sounding note in the chord. If I go from C to C diminished 7 and resolve back to C, the C diminished is a non-functioning embellishing chord. But what if I resolve C diminished 7 as if it is a functional chord? Then it'll want to go to D flat something. It could be major or minor. So basically what I'm doing is using the embellishing chord as a pivot to modulate somewhere else. Going from C to D flat is quite a jump. They are very far from each other on the circle of fifths. But again, because a fully diminished 7th chord is symmetrical and any note can be considered the root, I can do exactly what I just did but resolve to 4 different possible destinations. If I call G flat or F sharp the root of my diminished chord, I can go to G major. That sounds a lot more digestible than D flat. If I call A the root, I can go to B flat. That sounds pretty logical, a little more distantly related than G, but not a stretch. If I call E flat or D sharp the root, I can go to E. Even more distant, but still not as crazy as D flat. And there you go. This whole bit about modulating with an embellishing chord is definitely not a recommendation for something to try and use all the time, but it's a cool thing you can do for a dramatic effect in extreme situations. Most of the time, embellishing chords are just that, chords that embellish other functional chords. So that's all I've got for now. I hope you found that helpful. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.